The Galactic Diplomatic Summit on Varith Station was not a place for softness. Every species gathered in the Grand Concourse had earned their seat through blood or threat of it. The Corvan, with their bioluminescent spines that flickered warning colors when agitated. The Dresh, silicon-plated ambush predators who communicated in subsonic rumbles that made smaller species feel inexplicably afraid. The Thull Collective, a hive mind of six-limbed hunters who had eaten 3 diplomatic envoys before someone thought to explain the concept of representative immunity. And seated near the back, at a table slightly too small for the delegation's dignity, were the humans. 3 of them. 1 male, 2 female. They had arrived quietly, declined the ceremonial weaponry display that opened every summit, and asked if there was anything with caffeine available. Ambassador Yara Solano sat in the middle. She was not tall. She was not visibly armed. She had gray threading through her dark hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. And she was currently reviewing trade documents on a small tablet with the focused patience of someone who had been doing bureaucratic work for 20 years and expected to do it for 20 more. Nobody paid her much attention. That was their first mistake. The summit had been underway for 6 hours when the Corvan Patriarch's youngest offspring wandered away from the family enclosure. This was not unusual. Corvan cubs were notoriously mobile, driven by a neurological imperative toward novelty that their elders found charming and their security staff found exhausting. The cub, barely 2 seasons old, its spine still soft and its bioluminescence cycling through colors without pattern or purpose, had followed a reflection across the floor, then a sound, then simply the interesting smell of something it had never encountered before. The something was a human. Ambassador Solano noticed the cub approximately 3 seconds after it rounded the leg of her chair. She looked down over her reading glasses. The cub looked up. Its spines flickered pale yellow, the Corvan equivalent of uncertainty. She held very still. The cub took another step. It was about the size of a large house cat, warm-blooded despite appearances, with large dark eyes that were still developing their adult predatory focus. Its claws clicked softly against the station floor. It sniffed at her boot. Solano set down her tablet. Slowly, not reaching, not grabbing, just shifting, she lowered one hand to the floor, palm up, fingers relaxed. A posture that communicated nothing threatening in any language she knew. An open hand, an offer, a question. The cub sniffed her fingers. Then it climbed into her lap. Across the hall, the Corvan Patriarch's head of security realized the cub was missing. What followed was a controlled panic. Corvan security protocols for missing offspring were extensive and comprehensive and involved, at minimum, 6 armed escorts moving in a sweep pattern through any enclosed space. The Patriarch himself rose from his seat, spines blazing deep amber, a color that made every species in the room with predator recognition instincts take an involuntary step backward. The Grand Concourse went quiet. Not the polite quiet of a room coming to order. The instinctive quiet of a room full of apex predators recognizing that something significant was happening. The Corvan security team swept left, swept right. The Patriarch's spine cycled through amber into something closer to red. And then one of the security officers stopped. The officer had located the cub. It was in the lap of the small human female at the back table. The cub had, at some point in the last few minutes, arranged itself sideways across her thighs with its legs dangling, and the human had, apparently without thinking about it, rested one hand lightly on its flank. The cub's spines were cycling slow, deep blue, a color so rare in Corvan cubs that most security officers had never seen it in person. Deep blue meant peace. Deep blue meant, I am completely safe. I have chosen this place. Nothing can reach me here. The officer did not move. He was not sure he should. The Dresh delegate noticed next. Her species had excellent peripheral vision, a hunting adaptation, and the stillness of the Corvan security team had triggered her attention before she consciously registered why. She looked. She processed what she was seeing. She did not move either. The Thull Collective became aware 17 seconds later, information rippling through the hive mind the way it always did, not in words but in shared sensation. Look. There. The soft one. The cub. Blue. One by one, the species of the Grand Concourse found the same focal point. None of them spoke. This was, for a room containing beings who communicated through spine displays, subsonic territorial rumbles, and collective pheromone broadcasts, an extraordinary degree of restraint. But the scene in the back of the room demanded something that all of them, predator-brained as they were, understood at the level below language. You did not disturb a claimed cub. You did not make noise near a claimed cub. You absolutely did not approach without invitation. Ambassador Solano was aware that the room had gotten quiet. She did not look up. She was, at this point, experienced enough to know that looking up would involve making eye contact with something. And she was in a room full of species for whom direct eye contact had meanings she couldn't fully catalog without her briefing notes. She kept her gaze down and slightly to the left, which her diplomatic training suggested was the least provocative option across the widest range of cultural contexts. The cub shifted in her lap, resettled, and made a sound. The sound was low and rhythmic, and Solano had no reference for it, but it moved through her chest in a way that felt, improbably, like the purring of the cats she had grown up around. Not quite the same, but near enough that some deep mammalian part of her recognized the shape of it and relaxed. She kept her hand where it was. Light. Still. Not pressing. Just present. She thought, distantly, that her team lead was going to have significant feelings about this situation. She thought about the trade documents still open on her tablet. She thought about how the cub smelled faintly of something mineral and warm and entirely alien, and how its flank rose and fell with a rhythm that was faster than human, but steady. She stayed still. The Corvan Patriarch crossed the hall. The crowd parted. Of course it did. The Patriarch was 3 meters of apex evolution, and his amber spines had not yet faded. His footsteps were careful. He had good control, always, but near a sleeping cub, even the Patriarch moved with deliberate gentleness. He stopped 2 meters from the human's table. Ambassador Solano finally looked up. She met the Patriarch's eyes, or what she estimated were his eyes. The optics were complex, and held his gaze for exactly as long as she calculated was respectful, not submissive, not challenging. She gave a very slight nod. Then she looked back down at his cub. The cub did not stir. The Patriarch was quiet for a long moment. His spine cycled, amber shifting, slowly, through something she had no name for, a deep, layered color at the edge of her perception. The Corvan head of security, standing 6 steps behind the Patriarch, spoke quietly to the Dresh delegate who had edged close enough to hear. "I have protected this family for 11 years, he said, in the trade tongue that most species used between themselves. I have never seen a cub display deep blue with a stranger." The Dresh delegate said nothing, but she did not look away. The Patriarch lowered himself, slowly, to the floor in front of the human's table. It was not a posture of dominance. It was the posture a Corvan parent took to be at eye level with a young one. To be, in a biological sense, unthreatening. Present. Patient. He spoke. His voice was layered, subsonic, and audible at once, and Solano's translation earpiece rendered it with a slight delay. "You did not reach for him." It was not a question. "No," Solano said. "You did not move him when he chose you." "No." The Patriarch's spines shifted again. "In our culture," he said, "when a cub selects its ground, you do not take that from them. Not for convenience. Not for protocol." A pause. "Most species do not know this." "I didn't know it either," Solano said honestly. "He just looked like he needed somewhere to settle." The Patriarch was still for a long time. "What is your name?" he asked. "Yara Solano." "Ambassador." "Earth." "Ambassador Solano." Another pause. The spines were doing something she still couldn't read. "My cub has named you. In our tradition, that is binding for as long as he chooses to hold it. You are." The translation earpiece hesitated, cycling through options. "Veth Kai. Chosen ground." Solano looked down at the small warm weight in her lap. "I'm honored," she said. And she meant it. The Grand Concourse resumed its business eventually. Documents were reviewed. Positions were stated. Species who had been on the edge of breakdown over 3 separate territorial disputes found, somehow, that the afternoon's negotiations went smoother than expected. Nobody mentioned the human at the back table with the sleeping cub in her lap. Nobody had to. The room had already understood something that didn't need words. There were species in this galaxy that showed strength through size, through weapons, through displays of aggression that lit up every threat detection system evolution had ever built. And then there was the small human female who had held perfectly still, opened her hand, and let something wild choose her, and had not flinched or grabbed. or made it about herself for even a moment. The Corvan cub slept. The room, slowly, decided it was safe to breathe again.